I thought the worst thing my mother-in-law could do at her anniversary dinner was ignore me, but I was wrong when she handed me that heavy envelope and called it a reality check. I expected a rude note. Instead, I found a typed, professional document titled 47 Reasons My Son Should Divorce You. She wanted me to crumble in the powder room, but I decided to do something else. I walked back out and read it to the room. The gravel of the driveway crunched beneath the tires of our sedan, a sound that always reminded me of bones breaking. It was a dark thought to have before an anniversary dinner, but nothing about visiting my mother-in-law, Marlene, ever felt like a celebration. It felt like a summons. Grant reached over and squeezed my hand, his palm warm and dry. "You look beautiful." "Piper," he said, "just breathe. It is going to be fine. She has been in a good mood all week." I looked at him, my husband of 3 years, and tried to find the reassurance in his eyes. Grant Bailey was a good man, or at least, he tried very hard to be. He had the kind of face that made people trust him immediately. Soft edges, kind eyes, a smile that seemed to apologize for taking up space, but when it came to his mother, that apology often extended to my existence. "It is not her mood I am worried about," I said, keeping my voice even. "It is the strategy." Grant sighed, releasing my hand to put the car in park. "You overthink it. She just wants to celebrate Dad and her making it to 40 years. It is a big milestone. Let us just get through dinner, eat some cake, and we can be home by 9. I nodded, checking my reflection in the visor mirror one last time. I was 33 years old. I had a successful career in logistics. I managed complex supply chains for a living. I was capable, intelligent, and solvent. Yet, every time I walked through the double oak doors of the Bailey estate, I felt like a truant teenager waiting for the principal to expel me. We stepped out into the cool evening air. The house loomed ahead, a sprawling colonial in a polished suburban enclave where the lawns were manicured with scissors and the silence was heavy with judgment. The windows glowed with golden light, creating a tableau of warmth that I knew was entirely artificial. Marlene met us at the door. She was a woman who did not age so much as she calcified. Her hair was a helmet of blonde lacquer, her dress a sheath of expensive silk that cost more than my first car. "Happy anniversary, Marlene," I said, holding out a bottle of wine. It was a vintage she had mentioned liking 3 Christmases ago. I prided myself on those details. I thought they mattered. She took the bottle by the neck, barely glancing at the label. "Thank you. Piper, you can put your coat in the mudroom. We are keeping the front closet clear for the important guests." She smiled then. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes, stopping abruptly at the cheekbones. It was the first strike of the night, subtle and plausible enough that if I complained, I would look petty, important guests, as if the daughter-in-law was merely staff. I walked to the mudroom, hung my coat, and took a deep breath. Easy to love. I told myself, be easy to love, be easy to tolerate. When I entered the dining room, the courtroom atmosphere was already established. The long mahogany table was set with crystal and silver, arranged with mathematical precision. Place cards were set at every seat. I scanned the table for my name, assuming I would be next to Grant. I found Grant's card near the head of the table, to the right of his father, Robert. I found my card at the complete opposite end, sandwiched between an empty chair and Marlene's deaf aunt. "Linda." I looked at Marlene. She was busy adjusting a floral arrangement, her back to me. "I see you have separated the power couple," Grant joked, trying to keep the mood light as he moved toward his seat. Marlene turned, her expression practically vibrating with innocence. "Oh, stop it. I just wanted Piper to keep Aunt Linda company. You know how lonely she gets. And Piper has such a loud, projecting voice. It seemed practical." I sat down. The distance between Grant and me was physical, but it felt symbolic. From my vantage point at the foot of the table, I watched the other guests arrive. Cousins, business partners, neighbors, they all greeted Marlene with a reverence that bordered on fear. Dinner was a spectacle of courses that grew progressively richer. I spent the first hour shouting pleasantries at Aunt Linda, who smiled and nodded at entirely the wrong moments. Marlene held court at the other end, her laughter tinkling like broken glass. I watched her interact with Grant. She touched his shoulder, straightened his tie, whispered jokes in his ear. She was reclaiming him. Then came the toast. Marlene stood up, tapping a spoon against her champagne flute. The room fell into a hush. She spoke about commitment, about the 40 years she and Robert had weathered. She spoke about sacrifice. Then, her gaze drifted down the table, skipping over me entirely, and landing on Grant, and to my son. "Grant," she said, her voice trembling with performative emotion. "I want to toast your patience. We all know that life can be complicated, and we see how hard you work to keep things steady, even when you are burdened by things and people that make life heavier than it needs to be. You are a saint, darling, truly." She raised her glass. "To Grant's patience." The room murmured. "To Grant," but I felt the air leave my lungs, burdened. She had called me a burden in front of 20 people without ever saying my name. Grant looked down at his plate, his ears turning red. He drank his champagne quickly. He did not look at me. I stared at my husband, waiting for him to make eye contact, to offer a grimace, a shrug, anything to acknowledge that his mother had just insulted his wife. He kept his eyes on the tablecloth. "Piper, dear," Marlene called out, breaking my stare. "Would you mind helping me in the kitchen for a moment? The coffee service is ready." I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "Of course," I said. I followed her into the kitchen. It was pristine, the granite countertops gleaming under harsh recessed lighting. The catering staff had already cleared out, leaving a vacuum of silence. Marlene leaned against the island. She didn't ask about the coffee. Instead, she reached into a drawer and pulled out a crisp, white envelope. It was thick. "I have been thinking about you." "Piper," she said. Her voice was devoid of the sugary tone she used in the dining room. It was flat, clinical. "About me?" I asked, wary. "About your situation." She slid the envelope across the marble toward me. "I think it is time we stopped pretending. I know you think I am just a difficult mother-in-law, but I assure you, I am a very practical woman. I see things Grant is too polite to say." I looked at the envelope. It had my name typed on the front. Just Piper. No last name. "What is this?" I asked. "A reality check." She said, "I want you to take that to the powder room and read it. Read it like an adult. Then, I want you to come back out here and tell me if you really think you belong in this family." She smiled again. That terrible, dead-eyed smile. "Go on. We can wait for coffee." I took the envelope. My hands were trembling, but I clenched them into fists to hide it. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, past the dining room where the guests were laughing, and into the small guest powder room down the hall. I locked the door behind me. The room was wallpapered in expensive silk, smelling of lavender and cruelty. I sat on the closed lid of the toilet and tore open the seal. Inside was a stapled document. It wasn't a letter, it was a dossier. The title was centered at the top in bold. Size 14 font. 47 reasons my son should divorce you. I stared at the words. I blinked, expecting them to change, but they remained. 47 reasons. I turned the page. The document was formatted like a legal brief or a corporate risk assessment. There were headings. Section 1, Character Deficits. Section 2, Fitness as a Partner. Section 3, Financial Liabilities. Section 4, Risk Factors. I started reading. Reason number 1. Piper displays a consistent inability to assimilate into the family culture, often isolating herself at gatherings to attract attention. Reason number 2. Piper's career path in logistics suggests a rigidity of thought that clashes with Grant's creative needs. My stomach churned. These were petty, subjective swipes. But as I read further, the tone shifted from mean to menacingly specific. Reason number 12. Piper has accumulated $3,000 in undisclosed credit card debt in the last quarter, specifically on frivolous clothing purchases. Despite claiming to be frugal, I gasped. I did have a balance on my personal card, but it wasn't for clothes. It was for a course I was taking and a few work expenses I hadn't been reimbursed for yet. I had told Grant about it in passing, late one night while we were brushing our teeth. "I need to pay off that visa next month," I had said. How did she know that? I kept reading, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Reason number 24. Piper has expressed hesitation regarding traditional maternal roles. Citing a fear of losing her identity, which indicates she will be an unfit mother to future Bailey heirs. I froze. That was a conversation I had with Grant 6 months ago. We were lying in bed, the lights off, whispering in the dark. I had cried. I had told him I was scared of disappearing if we had a baby. It was one of the most vulnerable moments of my life. And here it was, typed, numbered, weaponized. Reason number 37. Piper's temperament is volatile. Grant has noted she becomes silent and withdrawn when criticized. A form of emotional manipulation designed to elicit guilt, Grant has noted. The room spun. I had to put a hand on the cold porcelain of the sink to steady myself. Grant, my husband, the man who just squeezed my hand in the car. He hadn't just listened to his mother's poison, he had provided the ingredients. Or had he? The phrasing was strange. Grant has noted. It sounded like a deposition. I flipped to the end. Reason 47. The marriage is visibly straining Grant's potential. He requires a partner who elevates him, not one who requires constant management. I sat there for a long time. The silence in the powder room was absolute. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale. My lipstick perfectly applied. I looked like the same woman who had walked in. But I wasn't. The Piper who walked in was trying to survive the dinner. The Piper looking back at me was done surviving. She wanted me to cry. She wanted me to storm out, to scream at Grant, to throw a drink. She wanted a scene that would prove reason number 37 right, that I was volatile, that I was unstable. If I ran away, she won. If I screamed, she won. I stood up. I folded the document, but I didn't put it back in the envelope. I held it in my hand. I unlocked the door and walked back down the hallway. The sound of my heels on the hardwood floor sounded like a metronome. Tick, tick, tick. I entered the dining room. Marlene was back at the head of the table, laughing at something her husband had said. She looked up as I entered, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. She expected red eyes. She expected a trembling lip. I pulled out my chair at the far end of the table and sat down. I placed the document on the white tablecloth, smoothing it out with a flat hand. Grant looked at me, confusion knitting his brow. "Piper? Are you okay? You were gone a while." I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the weakness in his jaw, the way he glanced at his mother before he glanced at me. "I am fine." "Grant," I said. My voice was steady. It didn't sound like my voice. It sounded like the voice of a woman who had nothing left to lose. Marlene cleared her throat. "Well, surely the coffee is ready. Piper?" "Actually, Marlene," I said, raising my volume just enough to cut through the ambient chatter. "Before we have coffee, I would like to share something." The table went quiet. Marlene's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Piper," she warned, her voice dropping an octave. "This is not the time. I think it is the perfect time," I said. "You gave me this document and asked me to read it like an adult. I have done that, and I think, given the effort you put into it, it deserves a wider audience." I picked up the papers. "What is that?" Grant asked, squinting. "It is a list," I said. "It is titled, 47 Reasons My Son Should Divorce You." A fork clattered onto a plate. Aunt Linda, who hadn't heard a word, smiled beamingly at me. The rest of the room went deathly still. "Piper, don't," Marlene hissed, standing up halfway. "It was a joke, a gag gift. Don't be so dramatic." I looked at the text. It didn't look like a joke. Reason number 5. I read aloud, my voice clear and projecting, just as Marlene had mocked earlier. Piper's family background is socioeconomically inferior, leading to a scarcity mindset that embarrasses the Bailey family brand. I looked up. Robert, my father-in-law, looked like he had swallowed a lemon. Marlene laughed. A high, brittle sound. Oh, for heaven's sake. Piper, it is a roast. We do this. It is family humor, I continued, ignoring her. Reason number 9. Piper's insistence on maintaining her own surname is a public disrespect to the Bailey lineage and suggests a lack of commitment. I turned the page. The room was freezing. People were looking at their laps, at their wine, anywhere but at me or Marlene. Reason number 18. I read, this one was legal sounding. Piper brings no significant assets to the union, making her a financial dead weight in the event of liquidating the estate. Grant stood up. Piper, stop. What are you doing? Let me see that. He reached for the paper, but I pulled it back. I'm just reading what your mother gave me. Grant, I said. Then I saw it. Reason number 33. I paused. The anger that had been a cold knot in my stomach suddenly flared into something hotter, something protective. Reason number 33. I read, slowing down for emphasis. Piper has concealed a history of gynecological dysfunction, specifically endometriosis, which renders her likely barren and therefore a genetic dead end for the family line. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a silence so heavy it felt like it could crush the furniture. I looked directly at Marlene. She was pale now. She knew she had crossed a line that humor couldn't cover. I put the paper down. That is an interesting point. Marlene, I said, my voice cutting through the quiet. Because I do not have endometriosis. I have never had endometriosis. And I have never discussed my fertility with you. I turned to Grant, but I did mention to you, 2 weeks ago, that my sister was diagnosed with it. I told you that in confidence. I looked back at Marlene. So, not only are you collecting gossip, you are getting the facts wrong. You are taking rumors and framing them as medical history to strangers. Grant looked from me to his mother. He looked confused, not angry, confused. Mom, he said, did you write this? Marlene sat down, composing herself with terrifying speed. She waved a hand dismissively. Oh, honestly, Grant, you are all being so sensitive. It was a list of concerns. A mother is allowed to have concerns. Piper is just twisting it to make a scene. Look at her. She is hysterical, proving my point. Really. She looked at me with a look of triumph. She thought she had me. She thought that by reacting. I was validating reason number 37. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I looked at Grant, waiting for him to defend me, waiting for him to say, "How dare you speak about my wife's medical history? How dare you write this?" Grant looked at the paper, then at the guests, then at his mother. "Piper," he said, his voice low, "put the paper away. Let us talk about this later. We are ruining the anniversary." The words hit me harder than the list had. We are ruining. Not she is ruining. He was managing me. He was doing damage control. He wasn't defending his wife. He was protecting the dinner party. I looked at him, and for the first time in 3 years, I didn't see the man I loved. I saw a coward in a tailored suit. "I see," I said quietly. I folded the paper carefully. I placed it back in the envelope. I stood up. "I think I will go wait in the car." I said, "Happy anniversary." "Marlene." I walked out of the dining room. I could feel their eyes on my back. I could hear Marlene starting to speak as soon as I crossed the threshold. "See? I told you. So dramatic. Poor Grant." I walked to the mudroom, put on my coat, and walked out into the cold night air. I sat in the passenger seat of our car. I didn't turn it on. I sat in the dark. I didn't cry. I felt like I should, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, a cold clarity was settling over me, crystallizing like ice on a pond. Grant came out 20 minutes later. He got in the car and slammed the door. That was a disaster. "Piper," he said, starting the engine. "You really couldn't just brush it off? You had to read it out loud? I didn't answer him. I didn't trust myself to speak. If I spoke, I would scream, and I was done screaming into the void. We drove home in silence. When we got to our house, the house we bought together, though Marlene's name was on the loan as a guarantor, another gift, I walked straight to my home office. "Piper?" Grant called from the hallway. "Are you coming to bed?" "In a minute," I said. I closed the office door and locked it. I turned on my scanner. I took the pages out of the envelope. I fed them through the machine, one by one. I watched the digital bars slide across my screen as the image formed. 47 reasons. I saved the file as a PDF. Then I opened my email. I attached the file and sent it to my personal email account. Then I sent it to a secondary secure cloud storage I used for work. I sat there in the glow of the monitor, looking at the list. Marlene thought this was a power play. She thought she could shame me into leaving, or scare me into submission. She thought I would crumble under the weight of her judgment. She was wrong. She had just handed me the evidence. She had put her cruelty in writing. I opened a new document on my computer. I typed the date at the top. Incident log. I typed date, October 14th. Location, Bailey residence. Witnesses, Grant Bailey, Robert Bailey, Linda Miller, 4 other guests. I began to type out exactly what had happened, quoting the conversation as best as I could remember. If she wanted a war, she wasn't going to get a hysterical daughter-in-law, she was going to get a witness. I finished typing, saved the log, and turned off the screen. I walked to the bedroom. Grant was already asleep. Or pretending to be. He was facing away from me. I lay down on my side of the bed, the distance between us feeling wider than the ocean. I stared at the ceiling. Reason number 48. I thought to myself, my husband is afraid of the truth. I closed my eyes. The game had changed, and for the first time all night, I stopped shaking. The morning sunlight hit the kitchen island with an aggressive brightness that felt personal. I stood there, clutching a mug of black coffee, watching the steam curl into the air. My head wasn't throbbing from alcohol. I had barely touched my wine the night before, but from a distinct, heavy pressure behind my eyes, it was the hangover of realization. Grant was standing at the toaster, buttering a bagel. The sound of the knife scraping against the toasted crust was loud in the quiet kitchen. Scrape, scrape, scrape. He was humming. It was a low, tuneless sound, the kind of noise a person makes when they are desperately trying to project normalcy into a room that is currently on fire. He turned around, offering me a plate. "Do you want half?" he asked. "It is cinnamon raisin." I looked at the bagel. Then I looked at him. He was wearing his running clothes, his hair slightly damp from a shower. He looked refreshed. He looked like a man who hadn't just watched his mother hand his wife a 47-point dossier on why their marriage should end. "I am not hungry," I said. Grant sighed, placing the plate down with a little too much force. "Piper, come on. Are we going to do this all day? The silent treatment?" "I am not giving you the silent treatment." "Grant," I said, keeping my voice level, "I am thinking." "Thinking about what? About last night? Look, Mom she was out of line. I admit that. But you have to understand, she is getting older. She gets these ideas in her head, and she fixates. It is just how she processes anxiety." I took a sip of coffee to keep from screaming. Anxiety. That was the family code word. Marlene's cruelty was always reframed as anxiety. Her manipulation was reframed as concern, and my reaction to it was always framed as the problem. I replayed the dinner in my head. The way Marlene had watched me read the list, the anticipation in her eyes. She hadn't looked anxious. She had looked hungry. She had wanted me to flip the table. She had wanted me to scream insults so she could turn to the room and say, "See? She is unstable." Reason number 37. If I shouted now, if I cried and threw the bagel at the wall, I was just playing my part in her script. I made a decision right then. Standing in my pajamas on the cold tile floor, I would not shout. I would not send angry texts. I would not cause a scene. I would be a gray rock, unmoving, uninteresting, and impenetrable. I walked over to the table and sat down. I placed my hands flat on the surface. "Grant," I said, "I have a question, and I need you to answer it without managing my feelings." He leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "Okay, did you know the list existed before last night?" He blinked. His eyes darted to the left, toward the refrigerator, then back to me. "Piper, I didn't know she was going to give it to you." I froze. The words hung in the air, slippery and revealing. "I didn't ask if you knew she would give it to me." I said, my voice dropping. "I asked if you knew it existed." He shifted his weight. "I knew she was writing things down. She called me a few weeks ago, really upset, just venting about some things she thought were issues. She said she needed to get it out of her system. I told her to write a letter and burn it. It is a therapy technique, right? I thought she was just venting. I didn't know she would type it up and laminate it. You knew she was compiling a list of reasons to divorce me." I said, "And you didn't tell me." "I didn't want to upset you," he insisted, throwing his hands up. "It was just her being mom. If I told you every crazy thing she said, we would never have a moment of peace. I was trying to protect you." "Protect me," I repeated. "By letting me walk into an ambush at her anniversary dinner?" He rubbed his face with his hands. I thought she was over it. She seemed so happy this week. I thought the list was in the trash. He was lying. Or rather, he was telling the version of the truth that allowed him to sleep at night. He knew she had the list. He might not have known she would hand it to me over appetizers, but he knew the ammunition was stockpiled, and he had said nothing. I stood up. "I'm going to the office," I said. "On a Saturday?" "I have work to do." I said, "I didn't go to my corporate office. I went to the small guest room we used as a study. The one room in the house Grant rarely entered because it was filled with my logistics textbooks and crafting supplies. I closed the door and locked it. I sat at the desk and opened my laptop. I pulled up the PDF I had scanned the night before. 47 reasons. I needed to stop seeing it as an insult and start seeing it as data. In my job, when a supply chain broke, I didn't cry about the missing cargo. I looked at the tracking numbers. I looked for the bottleneck. I opened a new spreadsheet. I created columns: accusation, source of information, fact versus fiction, witnesses. I started with the first 10. Most were general insults about my personality: abrasive, uncultured, aloof. But as I moved to the middle section, the fitness as a partner section, I noticed something disturbing. Reason number 22. Piper frequently complains about Grant's career trajectory, specifically undermining his desire to start his own consulting firm by citing risk aversion, which destroys his confidence. I stared at the screen. Grant and I had discussed him starting a firm exactly once. It was 3 months ago. We were sitting on our back patio, drinking wine. I had been supportive but realistic. I had said, "We should probably save 6 months of expenses before you quit the agency, just to be safe." He had agreed. He had seemed relieved, but in Marlene's list, my prudence was framed as destroying his confidence. Grant had repeated that conversation to her. He had taken my financial advice, twisted it into a complaint, and fed it to his mother. I felt a cold prickle of betrayal, but I pushed it down. I kept reading. Reason number 29. Piper has expressed a desire to move out of state, threatening to take Grant away from his aging parents, solely to spite the family bond. I stopped typing. This was wrong. I had never told Grant I wanted to move out of state. I loved our city. My job was here, but I had told someone. I had told Tessa. Tessa was my best friend since college. We met for coffee every Tuesday. About 2 months ago, I had been venting about the traffic and the cost of living. I had jokingly said, "Sometimes I just want to sell everything and move to Vermont and raise goats." It was a throwaway comment, a fantasy. I hadn't even told Grant because it wasn't serious. So how did it end up on Marlene's list, framed as a threat? I picked up my phone. My hands were shaking slightly. I texted Tessa, "Hey, are you free for coffee?" "I need to get out of the house," she replied instantly. "Always. The roasted bean in 20? See you there." I showered and dressed in jeans and a sweater, avoiding Grant, who was now watching football in the living room with the volume turned up too high. I walked out the back door. The coffee shop was busy, the air thick with the smell of roasted beans and rain. Tessa was sitting at a corner table, waving at me. She looked concerned. "You look like you saw a ghost," she said as I sat down. "Is everything okay?" I took a breath. Tessa was safe. Tessa was my person. But reason number 29 was screaming in my head. "Tessa," I said, "I need to ask you something weird." "Okay. Have you talked to Marlene lately?" Tessa blinked, looking surprised. "Marlene? Your mother-in-law?" "Yes." She hesitated. A flush of color rose in her cheeks. "Well, not talked. I mean, we had lunch a few weeks ago." The world tilted slightly on its axis. "You had lunch with Marlene?" She reached across the table and touched my hand. "Piper, don't be mad. She reached out to me on Facebook. She said she was planning a surprise for Grant's birthday and wanted some ideas. And then she just started crying. She said she was so worried about you. She said you seemed so stressed and unhappy lately, and she didn't know how to help. She asked if I thought you were happy in the marriage." I pulled my hand back. "And what did you say?" "I defended you," Tessa said, her eyes wide. "I told her you were great. I told her you were stressed with work." "Sure. And that the traffic was driving you crazy. I made that joke about the goats in Vermont. And that you guys were working on your savings. I told her you loved Grant." My stomach dropped. There it was. The goats in Vermont. The savings. "Tessa," I said quietly. "She wasn't worried about me. She was fishing." "What do you mean?" "I told her about the list. I told her about the dinner. I told her about reason number 29. Tessa's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God. Piper, I didn't know. She made it sound like she wanted to pay for a vacation for you guys. She asked if you wanted to travel. That is why I mentioned moving. I thought she was going to buy you tickets to Vermont." I believed her. Tessa wasn't malicious. She was just gullible. And Marlene was a master at exploiting gullibility. She had weaponized my best friend's desire to help me. "It is okay," I said, though it wasn't. "But you need to tell me everything else you talked about, every detail." We spent the next hour dissecting the lunch. Marlene had asked about my temper. She had asked if I ever threw things. She had asked if I drank a lot when we went out. She was building a case for instability. I whispered. She was checking boxes for a custody battle over a husband I haven't even divorced yet. I went home with a headache that felt like a migraine. Grant was gone, likely at the gym or escaping to the hardware store to avoid the tension. I went back to my study. I needed to see how far back this went. I logged into my email. I searched for Marlene's name. Usually, her emails were forwarded chain letters or passive-aggressive reminders about birthdays. I scrolled back 6 months. 7 months. I found an email from last April. Subject: just checking in/budgeting. I opened it. Dearest Piper, Grant mentioned you were feeling a bit overwhelmed with the household accounts. You know I used to run the books for Robert's practice for 30 years. I would be happy to take a look at your spending and help you streamline things. Maybe we can find some fat to trim? Send me over your last few statements if you like. Just between us girls. I remembered this email. At the time, I had thought it was intrusive but vaguely helpful. I hadn't sent the statements, thank God, but I had replied. I checked my sent folder. Thanks, Marlene. We are okay. We have a few expenses coming up with the car repairs and my medical checkups, but we are managing my medical checkups. I stared at the screen. I had mentioned medical checkups because I had a scare with a cyst that turned out to be nothing, but Marlene had taken that tiny crumb, medical checkups, and combined it with whatever rumors she heard, and baked it into reason number 33, gynecological dysfunction. She had been planning this for months, maybe a year. This wasn't an outburst. This was a surveillance operation. I needed to know where I stood, not emotionally, but legally. I picked up my phone and searched for family law attorneys. I didn't want a shark. I wanted a technician. I found a woman named Sarah Vance. Her website said she specialized in high-conflict mediation and complex asset division. I called the number. It was Saturday, so I got an answering service. I left a message. My name is Piper Bailey. I am not filing for divorce, but I have been presented with a document by my mother-in-law that concerns me. I need to understand my exposure. Please call me back. I hung up and felt a wave of nausea. Calling a lawyer felt like crossing a Rubicon. It felt like admitting that my marriage was a crime scene. I tried to act normal for the rest of the weekend. I did laundry. I meal prepped for the week. Grant and I moved around each other like ghosts, polite and distant. He asked if I wanted to watch a movie on Saturday night. I said I had work to do. On Sunday afternoon, I decided to try one last thing. The soft approach. The part of me that still loved Grant. The part that remembered our wedding day. Wanted to believe this could be fixed. Maybe if I humbled myself. Maybe if I gave her an off-ramp. I sent a text to Marlene. Hi, Marlene. I have had some time to think about Friday. I think things got out of hand. I would like to move past this for Grant's sake. Would you be open to getting coffee this week? Just us? I stared at the phone, watching the 3 dots appear and disappear. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Finally, a response buzz. Piper, I am glad you have taken time to reflect. However, I do not think a private meeting is appropriate right now. Your behavior on Friday was deeply disturbing to the family. Until you are ready to address the substance of my concerns rather than performing victimhood, I think we should keep our distance. I have asked Grant to come over for dinner Tuesday alone. I read the text twice. Performing victimhood. She was rejecting the olive branch and sharpening it into a spear. She was isolating Grant. Come over for dinner Tuesday alone. That was the reprogramming session. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot of the text. I added it to the digital log. On Monday morning, Sarah Vance's office called me back. They had a cancellation at 10 o'clock. I took an early lunch from work and drove to the office, a discreet brick building downtown. Sarah Vance was a sharp woman in her 50s with glasses on a chain and a desk clutter-free enough to land a plane on. She listened to me for 10 minutes without interrupting. Then she asked to see the list. I handed her the hard copy I had brought in a manila folder. She put on her glasses and began to read. The room was silent, save for the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. She turned the pages slowly. She said occasionally. Interesting. When she finished, she took off her glasses and looked at me. Mrs. Bailey? Who is your mother-in-law? Is she an attorney? No. I said, she is a housewife. She used to help with her husband's dental practice, but that was years ago. Does she have a close friend who is a paralegal? Or a retired judge? I don't know. I said, why? Because this isn't how a mother writes, Sarah said, tapping the document. This is how a lawyer writes. Look at the phrasing here in Reason 18. Financial deadweight in the event of liquidating the estate. And here, in Reason 40, alienation of affection regarding familial bonds. She leaned forward. These are terms of art. Marital waste. Spousal suitability. These are concepts we use in separation agreements and custody disputes to argue for a larger share of assets or sole custody. This isn't just a list of insults. It is a draft strategy for a divorce filing. I felt the blood drain from my face. You mean she wants Grant to file? I mean she is preparing him to file. Sarah corrected. And she is coaching him on the arguments to use so that you get nothing. If she can prove marital waste, that debt you mentioned, she can argue you dissipated assets. If she can prove instability, she attacks your claim to any future custody. She handed the list back to me. This was coached. Someone told her exactly what to write to trigger you, and exactly what to document to build a case against you. What do I do? I asked. My voice sounded small. Sarah Vance clasped her hands. You do exactly what you have been doing. You document, but you also need to protect yourself financially. Right now. Today. If this is the strategy. The next step is usually cutting off access to funds. She gave me a list of instructions. It wasn't advice on how to save my marriage. It was advice on how to survive its demolition. I left the office and walked straight to a bank down the street. A different bank than the one Grant and I used. I sat in a cubicle with a young man named Kevin who smelled like peppermint. I opened a checking account and a high-yield savings account in my name only. I transferred $5,000 from our joint savings, exactly half of what was in there. I didn't take more. I took exactly half. Fair, legal. Then I went to the safety deposit box in the vault. I didn't have one there yet, so I rented one. I put my passport in it. I put my birth certificate in it. I put the hard copy of the list in it. I walked out of the bank feeling lighter, but also colder. I went back to work and sat through 3 meetings about shipping containers in the Pacific, nodding and taking notes while my brain hummed with a different kind of logistics. When I got home that evening, Grant was in the kitchen making spaghetti. The smell of garlic and tomatoes filled the house, a domestic comfort that felt like a lie. "Hey," he said, trying to sound cheerful. "How was work?" "Fine," I said. "I saw the text from Mom." He said, stirring the sauce, "About dinner tomorrow." I froze, taking off my coat. "Did you?" "Yeah. Look, I think I should go, just to calm her down. If I don't go, she will just ramp up. I'll go. I'll listen to her lecture. I'll eat her pot roast, and I'll smooth things over, okay?" He looked at me with those pleading eyes. He wanted permission. He wanted me to absolve him of the choice he was making. I looked at him, and I saw the string attached to his back. I saw the invisible wire running all the way from our kitchen to Marlene's house. "Okay, Grant," I said, "you should go." He sagged with relief. "Thanks. Piper, you are the best. I promise. I'll shut down any crazy talk." I smiled. It was a small, tight smile. I didn't tell him about the bank account. I didn't tell him about the lawyer. I didn't tell him that I knew he had fed Marlene the line about the Vermont goats. I walked into the bedroom to change. I looked at our wedding photo on the dresser. We looked so young, so happy. I turned the frame face down. Grant went to dinner the next night. I stayed home. I ate a sandwich over the sink. Then I went to my computer. I pulled up the online banking for our joint account. I wanted to check if the transfer had cleared. It had, minus $5,000. But then I saw something else, a pending transaction from that morning. Withdrawal, $500. Location, ATM, Venetian Casino. There were no casinos in our city. I clicked on the transaction details. It wasn't a casino. It was a placeholder name for a generic ATM withdrawal, but the location code was for a zip code 30 minutes away. I Googled the address. It was a strip mall. There was a dry cleaner, a liquor store, and a law office, Holloway Associates, family law. Grant hadn't gone to the casino. He had gone to a lawyer, or Marlene had taken him to one, and he had used cash so it wouldn't show up as a credit card charge. My heart hammered. Sarah Vance was right. They were moving. I closed the laptop. I walked into the living room and sat on the couch in the dark, waiting for my husband to come home from his mother's house. I wasn't Piper the wife anymore. I was Piper the witness, and the trial had just begun. The silence in our house had changed texture. Before the anniversary dinner, it had been the silence of 2 people tired from work, comfortable and worn in like an old sweater. Now, it was the silence of a wiretap. Every sound, the clink of a fork, the buzz of a phone, the closing of a door, felt charged with potential evidence. I kept my promise to myself. I did not scream. I did not cry. I went to work. I bought groceries, and I smiled when Grant asked me about my day. But beneath the surface, I was a seismograph, waiting for the next tremor. It didn't take long. 2 weeks after the dinner, we were invited to a backyard barbecue at the home of Grant's cousin, Bethany. Under normal circumstances, I would have looked forward to it. Bethany was one of the few Baileys who seemed to have a personality independent of the collective hive mind. She was a graphic designer with a messy bun and a loud laugh. Grant was hesitant. "Maybe we should skip it," he said, adjusting his watch. "You know, let the dust settle. We are going," I said, buttoning my cardigan. "If we hide, we look guilty. If we go and act normal, we look like the sane ones." So we went. We bought a bottle of Pinot Noir and a box of artisanal crackers. We drove the 20 minutes to Bethany's house in a silence that was becoming our primary language. The party was in full swing when we arrived. Smoke rose from the grill, carrying the scent of charred chicken and sweet corn. Children were screaming in the inflatable pool. It was a picture of suburban Americana, but the moment we stepped onto the patio, the temperature dropped. Conversations didn't stop, but they shifted. I saw eyes dart toward me and then quickly away. I saw heads lean together. I walked toward the drink cooler, determined to be pleasant. "Hi." "Aunt Sheila," I said, smiling at Grant's aunt, a woman who had always sent us lovely Christmas cards. She looked at me, her smile tight and pitying. "Hello, Piper. You look, well, rested." "I am doing great. Thanks," I said. She reached out and patted my arm. Her hand lingered a second too long. It wasn't a friendly touch. It was the way you touch a rescue dog that might bite. "We have all been praying for you," she whispered. I froze. "Praying for me?" "For peace," she said vaguely. "For clarity. It is hard, what you are going through. But we want you to know we support Grant no matter what." "What am I going through?" "Sheila?" I asked, keeping my voice light. She blinked, looking uncomfortable. "Oh, well, the stress, the volatility. Marlene mentioned you have been struggling with your moods. It is nothing to be ashamed of. My sister had episodes in her 30s, too." Episodes. I felt a cold flush rise up my neck. Marlene hadn't just given me a list. She was diagnosing me to the extended family. She was painting a picture of a woman on the edge of a breakdown, someone unstable, someone who needed to be handled with gloves. I pulled my arm back. "I am perfectly healthy." "Sheila." Marlene might be projecting. Sheila's eyes narrowed. "See? There is that defensiveness she mentioned. Just try to relax. Piper, we just want Grant safe." Safe. The word hung in the air like a slap. We just want Grant safe. As if I were a danger to him. As if I were the abuser. The threat. The risk factor. I walked away before I could say something that would end up as reason number 49. I found Grant by the grill, holding a beer, laughing with Bethany's husband. He looked relaxed. He looked like he belonged. I stood by the fence, watching him. He wasn't defending me. He was basking in the sympathy. I could see it in the way his shoulders slumped when his uncle clapped him on the back, the way he nodded solemnly when someone whispered in his ear. He was playing the role of the long-suffering husband, the Saint Marlene had toasted. I realized then that the list wasn't a private document. It was a press release. The second blow came 3 days later, and it came from the digital cloud. I was at work, staring at a spreadsheet of shipping manifests. When my phone buzzed, it was an email notification. Subject, FWD. Receipts for October/Thanksgiving planning. It was from Grant's great-aunt Millicent. Millicent was 80 years old and notoriously bad with technology. She frequently forwarded chain emails about hackers and cookie recipes to the entire family list. This time, she had forwarded a thread about the upcoming Thanksgiving potluck, but she hadn't cleaned up the history. I scrolled down, past the discussion about turkey brines and sweet potato casseroles, and there, buried in the middle of the thread from 2 months ago, was an email from Marlene. To the Bailey Ladies Group, subject, concern regarding contribution. Hi everyone. I know we usually split the cost of the rental cottage for the reunion, but I am going to cover Grant's share this year privately. I do not want to put pressure on them. Piper has been incredibly reckless with their accounts lately, buying luxury goods while Grant is trying to save for his firm. I am attaching a few screenshots Grant sent me because I am just so worried they are going to go under. Please do not mention it to her. She gets very reactive about money. I just want to protect my son from drowning in debt. Attached to the email were 3 images. I clicked on them, my heart hammering against my ribs. The first was a screenshot of a credit card statement. It showed a charge for $400 at a high-end department store. I remembered that charge. It was for a suit. A suit I bought for Grant for his brother's wedding because he said his old one was too tight. The second was a screenshot of a transaction for a spa weekend. $300. That was a gift certificate I bought for my mother for her birthday. The third was a photo of a receipt for a dinner at a steakhouse, $200. That was our anniversary dinner last year, which I paid for. Marlene had framed these expenses as my personal frivolity. She had stripped away the context, that I was spending money on her son or my family, and presented it as evidence of a shopping addiction. And the worst part? I am attaching a few screenshots Grant sent me. Grant sent them. He hadn't just vented. He had provided documentation. He had taken screenshots of our joint account, or perhaps I had left my phone unlocked and he had forwarded them to himself. I sat in my office chair, feeling the blood drain from my extremities. This wasn't just a mother-in-law overstepping. This was a systematic dismantling of my character, financed by my husband's betrayal. I printed the email. I printed the attachments. I put them in my bag. When I got home, Grant was in the living room, watching a documentary about World War II. He looked up and smiled. "Hey, hun, pizza tonight? I am too tired to cook." I walked over to the coffee table and placed the papers down. I didn't throw them. I placed them gently, covering the remote control. "What is this?" he asked, reaching for the stack. I watched him read. I saw the color rise in his cheeks, turning his ears a bright, guilty pink. "This is an email your mother sent to the entire female side of your family," I said, 2 months ago, framing me as a financial liability, using screenshots that you sent her. Grant stood up, the papers crumpling in his hand. "Piper, wait, this isn't what it looks like." "Really?" I asked. "Because it looks like you sent her screenshots of a suit I bought for you and let her tell your aunts that I was blowing money on myself." "I was just venting," he pleaded. "I was frustrated that month because the credit card bill was high. I didn't mean it like that. I sent her the text showing the total, and I guess the breakdown was attached. I didn't know she would save it. I didn't know she would send it to Aunt Millicent." "You didn't know," I repeated. "That seems to be your catchphrase. Grant, you didn't know she would make a list. You didn't know she would show the family. You are the most unknowing man on the planet." He raked his hand through his hair. "I was just looking for support. Piper, you are so independent. You don't need anyone. Sometimes I just need my mom to tell me it is going to be okay. She worries about money. I was just showing her we had expenses. I didn't tell her to lie about what they were." "But you didn't correct her, did you?" I asked softly. "You let everyone believe I'm dragging you down. Because it feels good, doesn't it? It feels good to be the victim. It feels good to be the patient saint married to the reckless woman." He looked at me, and for a second, the mask slipped. I saw resentment. Deep, old resentment. "You are always so perfect with money." "Piper," he muttered, "you have your spreadsheets. You have your logistics. Maybe I just wanted someone to be on my side for once." I stared at him. The man I married was dissolving, revealing a frightened boy who would burn his wife at the stake to keep his mother warm. "I am not going to fight you, Grant," I said. "I am too tired to fight. But we are going to counseling." "Counseling?" he asked, looking surprised. "Yes, a professional, someone neutral, because I cannot listen to you translate your mother's insanity into love anymore." He hesitated, then nodded vigorously. "Yes, okay, let us do that. I think that is a great idea. We need a mediator, someone who can help us communicate better." He agreed too quickly. There was no resistance, no negotiation. He looked relieved, almost eager. It was the reaction of a student who had studied for the test and couldn't wait to show off the answers. I felt a knot of unease tighten in my stomach. He wasn't afraid of counseling, which meant he, or Marlene, thought they could win it. I found a therapist named Dr. Aris. I chose him because his bio emphasized systems theory and boundary work. I didn't want someone who would just ask us how we felt. I wanted someone who would look at the architecture of the house and tell us the foundation was rotten. Our first session was on a Thursday evening. Dr. Aris's office was beige and smelled of cedar. We sat on a love seat that was slightly too small, forcing our thighs to touch. Grant kept his hands clasped between his knees. "So, Doctor," Aris said, looking at us over his spectacles, "what brings you here?" Grant spoke first. He didn't look at me. He looked straight at the doctor, his face open and earnest. I think we have a fundamental incompatibility in our communication styles. Grant began. He sounded like he was reading a brochure. Piper is very rigid. She has a scarcity mindset that makes it hard for us to move forward as a partnership. I feel like I'm constantly being managed, rather than loved. I sat very still. Scarcity mindset. That was reason number 5. Doctor? Aris nodded. Can you give me an example of this rigidity? Well, Grant continued, warming up to his theme. For instance, I have dreams of starting my own firm. It is a risk. Sure, but Piper focuses entirely on the liabilities. She doesn't see the potential for growth. She fixates on the negative. It creates an environment where I feel stifled. It is a fitness issue. We aren't fit as partners if she can't support my vision. Fitness as a partner. Reason number 2. I looked at Grant. He wasn't speaking from his heart. He was reciting the gospel according to Marlene. He had memorized the list so thoroughly that he thought these were his own original thoughts. Piper? Doctor. Aris turned to me. How do you respond to that? I took a breath. I didn't get angry. I didn't defend myself against the adjectives. I pivoted to the data. Doctor, Aris, I said calmly, when Grant says I have a scarcity mindset, I believe he is referring to a conversation we had on August 12th regarding our savings rate. Grant, do you remember that conversation? Grant blinked. Generally. Yes. Do you remember that I suggested we save 6 months of expenses before you quit your job? I asked. Well, yes, but the tone. And do you remember that you agreed? I asked. Do you remember that you actually set the savings goal yourself? You said, and I quote, I don't want to leave until we have $30,000 in the bank. I pulled a small notebook from my purse. I had started bringing the log everywhere. I checked the date. August 12th. You said $30,000. I actually suggested $25,000. So, technically, your risk aversion was higher than mine. Grant shifted in his seat. You are doing it right now, he said, pointing at the notebook. The documenting. It is so controlling. Who keeps a record of their marriage like this? It is paranoid. It is factual. I said, and when the facts are being distorted to my husband's family to frame me as financially abusive, I find that paranoia is just good record-keeping. Doctor? Aris looked at the notebook. Then he looked at Grant. Grant, he said softly, does your mother have any input on your views about Piper's scarcity mindset? Grant stiffened. He sat up straighter, a defensive posture I knew well. My mother is a very wise woman, he said. She sees things clearly. She just wants us to be happy. She thinks Piper dominates the emotional space, and I agree. You agree with your mother. Doctor, Aris clarified. I agree with the assessment, Grant snapped. Why does everyone keep making this about her? This is about how I feel, but he didn't feel it. He was wearing his mother's feelings like a suit that didn't fit. He was using her words, her cadence, her logic. The session ended with Grant feeling vindicated because he had spoken his truth, and me feeling like I had been arguing with a ghost. As we walked to the car, Grant seemed lighter. See? That was good. He really listened. I think we are making progress. I unlocked my car door. Grant, I said, you quoted the list 3 times in there. No, I didn't, he scoffed. You said scarcity mindset. You said fitness as a partner. You said emotional space. Those are Marlene's headers. We spend a lot of time together, he said, shrugging. We share a vocabulary. It doesn't mean I am brainwashed. Piper, stop trying to find a conspiracy. The next day, I found the conspiracy. I was in our home office, looking for our insurance policy. The renewal was coming up, and I wanted to check the deductible. I logged into the carrier's portal. I navigated to the life insurance section. We both had term policies, $500,000 each. I clicked on Grant's policy. Primary beneficiary, Piper Bailey, 50%. Primary beneficiary, Marlene Bailey, 50%. I stared at the screen. The numbers blurred. 50%. When we took out the policies 3 years ago, I was the 100% beneficiary. That was the standard. Spouses protect spouses. I checked the last updated timestamp. October 16th. 2 days after the anniversary dinner. 2 days after she handed me the list. I sat back, feeling a physical blow to my chest. He had cut my security in half. He had literally diverted the future assets of our marriage to his mother. I clicked on the History tab. The change had been made online. I didn't scream. The rule was still in place. No scenes. I waited until Grant came home. He was in a good mood, whistling as he hung up his coat. "Grant," I said from the kitchen doorway, "why is your mother a 50% beneficiary on your life insurance policy?" He stopped whistling. He didn't turn around immediately. He took a long time hanging up his coat. "Oh, that," he said, his voice straining for casualness. "Mom and I were talking about estate planning. She mentioned that if something happened to us, like a car crash, it would be complicated if everything went to you and you were, incapacitated, or if we both died. If we both died, it would go to the contingent beneficiary," I said, "which is your brother. That is how the policy was set up." "Yeah, but she said that probate is a nightmare," he said, turning around. "She said it is simpler if she is a primary. She can manage the funds. She can make sure you are taken care of. It is for your protection." "Piper, for my protection." "Grant," I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. "If you die, I lose your income. I lose our health insurance. I have a mortgage to pay. That $500,000 is to keep me from losing this house. If half of it goes to your mother, she would give it to you if you needed it." He interrupted. "She is not a monster. She just wants to be involved. She wants to make sure the money isn't wasted." Wasted. There it was. The echo of Reason 18. Financial dead weight. She had convinced him that I was incompetent. She had convinced him that I would squander his death benefit on… what? Shoes? No, it wasn't about the money. Marlene had plenty of money. It was about the tether. If Grant died, she wanted me to have to come to her. She wanted me to have to beg. She wanted to hold the purse strings even from beyond the grave. She wanted to ensure that I could never be free of the Bailey influence. And Grant? Grant had handed her the scissors to cut me out. I realized then that this wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a hostage situation, and I was the only one who didn't know I was a prisoner. "Change it back," I said. "Piper, you are being unreasonable. Change it back. Grant, tonight, or I walk." He looked at me. He saw something in my face that terrified him. It wasn't anger. It was the total absence of hope. "Fine," he shouted. "Fine, if it means that much to you. God, you are so obsessive about money." Just like she said. He stomped to the office. I heard the furious typing. I didn't follow him. I stood in the kitchen, looking at the refrigerator magnets. A photo of us in Hawaii. A grocery list. A magnet that said, "Home Sweet Home." He would change it back tonight. But tomorrow? Next week? Marlene would whisper in his ear again. She would tell him I was bullying him. She would tell him I was greedy. And he would change it back. Or he would change something else. I couldn't live like this. I couldn't police my husband's autonomy every hour of the day. I needed leverage. I needed something that would break the spell. Logic wasn't working. Love wasn't working. Facts were being twisted. I needed a ghost. I went to my purse and pulled out the old address book I kept. I flipped to the letter D. Diane Bailey, Grant's aunt, Marlene's sister-in-law, the one who had stopped coming to Thanksgiving 10 years ago, the one Grant was forbidden to mention. The family story was that Diane was difficult, that she had caused drama, that she was jealous of Marlene's success. But I knew now how Marlene defined difficult. Difficult meant immune to bullshit. I found the number. It was an old landline. I didn't know if it still worked. I waited until Grant was in the shower. I went out to the car, the only place that felt safe. I dialed the number. It rang 4 times. Then a voice answered. It was raspy, sharp, and sounded nothing like the sweet, poisonous tone of the Bailey women. "Hello? Hi," I said. "Is this Diane? Who is asking?" "This is Piper Bailey. Grant's wife. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear the hum of a television in the background. Piper, the voice said. I was wondering when you would call. You were? Honey, Diane said, and I could hear the lighter strike. I heard she gave you the list. How do you know about the list? Diane let out a dry, barking laugh. Because, darling, she gave me one 20 years ago. I gripped the phone. You, me, and 2 other women before you. It is her signature move, the 47 reasons. Although, I think mine was only 32. She must be getting more thorough in her old age. Can I come see you? I asked. I am an hour north, Diane said. Come alone, and bring the list. I want to see if she is still using the same font. I hung up the phone. My hand was shaking. But this time, it wasn't from fear, it was from adrenaline. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't the first, and I wasn't alone. I looked back at the house. The bathroom light was off. Grant was probably in bed, scrolling on his phone, maybe texting his mother that he had handled me. I started the car engine. Not to leave, just to feel the vibration. Reason number 48. I thought, the enemy of my enemy is my aunt-in-law. I turned off the car and went inside. I slept in the guest room again, but this time, I slept soundly. I had a plan. And tomorrow, I was going to find out exactly who Marlene Bailey really was. The drive to Diane's house took me out of the manicured grid of the suburbs and into the winding, tree-lined roads of the county north of us. The scenery changed from homeowners' associations and pristine lawns to farmhouses with peeling paint and mailboxes leaning at 45-degree angles. It felt like driving backward in time, away from the polished facade of the Bailey family and toward something raw. Diane lived in a small, cedar-shingled cottage set back from the road. The driveway was gravel and steep. When I pulled up, I saw a woman sitting on the porch swing, smoking a cigarette. She wore denim overalls and a flannel shirt, her gray hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. She looked nothing like Marlene. She looked like a woman who chopped her own wood. I stepped out of the car, clutching the manila folder that contained the 47 reasons. You made good time, Diane said. Not standing up, she took a drag of her cigarette and exhaled a plume of blue smoke. You are prettier than the last one, scrappier, too. If you drove all the way out here, I walked up the steps. The last one? I asked. Sit, she said, kicking out a wicker chair opposite her. Do you want lemonade? It is fresh. I don't do alcohol. Seen too many Baileys drown in it. I sat down. No, thank you. I just want answers. Diane stubbed out her cigarette in a terracotta pot. She looked at me with eyes that were the exact same shade of blue as Grant's. It was unsettling. Let me see it, she said, holding out a calloused hand. I handed her the folder. She opened it, adjusting a pair of drugstore reading glasses on her nose. She flipped through the pages quickly, her expression unreadable. She didn't gasp. She didn't shake her head. She just nodded, a grim rhythm of confirmation. Same font, she muttered. Times New Roman, size 12, double-spaced. She always liked it to look official, like a warrant. She closed the folder and tossed it onto the small table between us. It is a classic, she said, a Marlene Bailey original. You said there were others, I said, leaning forward. Who? Diane sighed, looking out at the woods surrounding her property. Before you, there was a girl named Elena. This was about 7 years ago, before Grant met you. Elena was sweet, a teacher, very soft-spoken. Grant was head over heels for her. They were talking about engagement rings. What happened? Marlene happened. Diane said. She started small, criticizing Elena's cooking, making comments about her weight. But Elena was polite. She took it, so Marlene escalated. She started a whisper campaign at the church, told people Elena was unstable, said she had a history of violence. Violent? I asked. A soft-spoken teacher? Diane laughed. A dry barking sound. The lie doesn't have to be true. Piper, it just has to be loud. Marlene created a binder, not a list like yours, but a binder. She called it the concern log. She documented every time Elena had a glass of wine, Every time Elena raised her voice. She even hired a private investigator to look into Elena's ex-boyfriend. She found out they had a bad breakup, and she spun it as Elena being a stalker. My stomach churned. A private investigator? She presented it to Grant at a birthday dinner. Diane continued, just like she did to you. But Elena didn't have your spine. She crumbled. She cried. She begged Grant to believe her. And Grant did what Grant does. He froze. He tried to play peacemaker. He told Elena his mom just cared too much. And Elena left, Diane said. She packed her bags and moved to Oregon. She told me she couldn't marry a man who let his mother hunt her for sport. She looked at me intently. That is what this is? Piper? It is a hunt, and you are the trophy buck. But why? I asked, the frustration bubbling up. Why does she hate me? I have a job. I pay my bills. I love her son. I have tried so hard to be perfect for her. Diane shook her head. That is your mistake. You think this is about you. You think if you were richer, or prettier, or quieter, she would like you. Honey, you could be the Queen of England, and Marlene would still hand you a list of reasons why your crown was crooked. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. This isn't about who you are. It is about what you represent. You represent a life where Grant doesn't need her. You represent a closed door. Marlene doesn't know how to exist if she isn't the protagonist of Grant's life. If he loves you, he has less room for her. It is zero-sum to her. For her to win, you have to lose. She tapped the folder. This list? It is a purity test. She wants to see if you will break. If you break. She wins because you are unstable. If you fight back. She wins because you are aggressive. The only way to lose is to play. I looked at the folder. I felt a strange mixture of horror and relief. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't a bad wife. I was just the current target in a decades-long war for control. So how do I stop her? I asked. Diane smiled, and it was a sharp, dangerous smile. You stop trying to be her daughter-in-law, and you start being the one thing she is terrified of. Which is? The truth. Diane said, Marlene lives in a house built of mirrors and smoke. She rewrites history. She controls the narrative. If you want to survive, you have to be the one holding the hammer. I drove home with Diane's voice ringing in my ears. She eats what she can't control. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Grant's car. He was home early. I walked inside. The house was quiet, but the air felt thick, charged with static. Grant was sitting at the dining room table. He wasn't watching TV. He wasn't on his phone. He was just sitting there, staring at his hands. Grant? I asked, putting my keys in the bowl. He looked up. His face was pale, his eyes rimmed with red. He looked like a man who had been interrogated for 12 hours. Mom called. He said, his voice was hollow. And? She wants a meeting, he said. A family meeting. Tomorrow night. She says we need to clear the air. She says things have gotten toxic, and she wants to fix it. Toxic, I repeated. She hands me a divorce dossier, spreads rumors that I am barren, and convinces you to cut me out of your life insurance. But I have made things toxic. Piper, please, Grant said, rubbing his temples. I can't do this anymore. I can't be in the middle. She is crying. She is saying she can't sleep. She says she is worried about you. She wants to sit down and just talk. Put everything on the table. For my future. For his future. Not ours. His. I looked at my husband. He was begging me to surrender. He wanted me to walk into the slaughterhouse so he could have a quiet weekend. Okay, I said. He blinked. Okay? You will go? I will go, I said, but not to her house, and not on her terms. I went to my bag and pulled out a notepad. I grabbed a pen. If we are having a meeting, I said, writing as I spoke, we are treating it like a meeting, not an ambush. I tore the sheet off the pad and handed it to him. Conditions for meeting. 1. Location must be neutral. The conference room at the public library or a hotel lobby. No private residences. 2. Attendees are limited to Piper, Grant, And Marlene. No surprise guests. No Robert. No Aunt Sheila. 3. No recording devices. 4. The agenda is to discuss the 47 Reasons document and the subsequent financial interference. No other topics. Grant read the paper. Piper, this is ridiculous. It is my mother, not a corporate merger. You are acting like a lawyer. I am acting like an adult who is tired of being ambushed. I said, send it to her. If she agrees, I will be there. If she refuses, I stay home. Grant sighed. A long, rattling sound of defeat. He took a photo of the note and texted it to her. We waited. 10 minutes passed. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. Then, Grant's phone chimed. He looked at the screen. He winced. What did she say? I asked. He turned the phone around so I could see. Oh, Grant, this is hilarious. Does she think she is in a courtroom TV show? Fine. If she needs to play pretend to feel safe, we can meet at the library, book a room, but tell her to leave the drama at home. I am bringing cookies. She is bringing cookies. It was a power move. It was a way of saying, this is just a little chat, and you are being hysterical. But she had agreed. Confirm it. I said, the next evening, at 7 o'clock. We walked into the small conference room at the distinct library. It was a sterile room with gray carpet, a round laminate table, and a whiteboard that still had faint marker stains from a previous meeting. Marlene was already there. She was sitting at the head of the table, of course, wearing a soft pink cardigan and a string of pearls. She looked grandmotherly. She looked harmless. On the table in front of her was a tin of Danish butter cookies, and next to the cookies was a thick, bound document. Hello, darlings, she cooed as we walked in. She stood up to hug Grant, holding him tight for a long moment, glancing at me over his shoulder. Her eyes were hard as flint. Piper, she said, releasing Grant and nodding at me. Thank you for fitting us into your busy schedule. I pulled out a chair and sat down. I placed my own folder on the table. Hello, Marlene. Grant sat between us, looking like he wanted to dissolve into the carpet. So, Marlene began, clasping her hands. We are here to lower the temperature. I feel like there has been a terrible misunderstanding. My little list. It was meant to be private, a mother's heart on paper. And somehow, it has been twisted into this. War. She looked at me with pity. Piper, I know you are sensitive. Grant tells me you struggle with criticism, but we need to be honest if this marriage is going to work. I didn't take the bait. I kept my face blank. Diane's voice was in my head. Be the hammer. We are here to discuss the list, I said, and the fact that you shared private medical and financial information with the extended family. Marlene sighed. Oh, Piper, you are so fixated on the past. I wanted to look forward. In fact, she reached for the bound document on the table. Since you seem to think my observations were biased, I took the liberty of asking around. I wanted to make sure I wasn't being unfair. So, I asked the family. I asked our friends. I asked the people who love Grant. She slid the document toward me. It was titled, Witness Statements, Concerns Regarding Piper Bailey. I felt Grant stiffen beside me. Mom? What is this? It is the truth. Grant, she said softly, it is hard to hear. I know. But Piper needs to see how her behavior affects everyone, not just me. I opened the packet. It was a collection of emails and typed letters. From Aunt Sheila. Piper was aggressive at the barbecue. She cornered me and demanded to know why I was praying for her. It was frightening. She seems unhinged. From Cousin Bethany. Piper twisted my words about the vacation. I never said she was controlling, but she definitely makes Grant walk on eggshells. I worry about him. From a neighbor I had met twice. She never waves. It is like she thinks she is better than us. Very cold. There were 10 of them. 10 people I had broken bread with. 10 people who had smiled at my face and then written paragraphs about my coldness, my instability, my arrogance. It was a firing squad. Marlene watched me read. She was waiting for the tears. She was waiting for me to throw the packet at her. She was waiting for the explosion that would prove every single letter true. I felt the heat rise in my chest, a physical wave of pain. But I remembered the rule, no scenes. I took out my phone. "What are you doing?" Marlene asked, her smile faltering. "I am taking photos," I said calmly. I laid the pages flat and snapped a picture of each one. Click, click, click. "You can't do that," she snapped. "That is private correspondence. It is a document you presented in a meeting," I said, turning a page. From Uncle Bob. "Piper's spending habits are the talk of the town." Interesting. I didn't know Uncle Bob had access to my bank accounts. "Oh wait, he doesn't. You do?" I finished photographing the packet. I closed it and slid it back to her. "Thank you, Marlene," I said. "This is very helpful." "Helpful?" she repeated, confused. She looked at Grant. Why isn't she upset? "Because it is evidence." I said, "Evidence of what? That everyone dislikes you?" "Evidence of a coordinated harassment campaign." I said. I opened my own folder. "Now," I said, "let us talk about the original list, the 47 reasons." I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It wasn't the list itself. It was a metadata report. I scanned the document you gave me. "Marlene, did you know that most modern printers leave a microscopic tracking code on every page? It is yellow dots, invisible to the naked eye, but very visible to a scanner. It tells you the time, date, and serial number of the printer used." Marlene went still. Her hands froze over the cookie tin. "I had a friend in IT run the code." I lied. It wasn't a friend. It was a simple online tool. But she didn't know that. "Do you know where this list was printed?" "Marlene?" She didn't answer. She stared at me, her mouth a tight line. "It was printed on October 12th at 4:30 p.m. I read, "At the administration office of St. Jude's Parish." I looked up. "The church where you volunteer. The church where you run the charity drive." Grant made a choking sound. "Mom? You wrote this at church?" I might have printed it there." Marlene stammered, her face flushing a blotchy red. "My printer was out of ink." "It doesn't matter. It matters," I said, "because it means you were using church resources to draft a manifesto against your son's wife. And I wonder, does Father Michael know you used the parish office to try and dismantle marriages?" Marlene stood up. "This is outrageous. You are attacking my faith now?" Grant, "Make her stop." "Sit down." "Marlene," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was hard. Harder than I had ever spoken to her. She sat. She looked shocked. I pulled out another paper. This was a screenshot of the email draft Diane had told me about. Or rather, a bluff based on what Diane had told me. "And this," I said, sliding a printed screenshot across the table. "This is an email timestamp. You didn't write this list alone, did you? You had help. You sent drafts to your friend, the paralegal. What is her name? Brenda?" Marlene's eyes widened. "How did you—" "You used legal terminology." I said, "Marital waste, spousal suitability. You weren't just venting. Marlene, you were building a legal strategy. You were planning a divorce for a man who hadn't even asked for one." I looked at Grant. He was staring at the table, his face gray. He looked like a man waking up from a long coma to find his house burning down. "Grant," I said, "look at me." He looked up. His eyes were wet. "Your mother didn't write this because she loves you." I said, "She wrote it because she wants to own you. She consulted a lawyer before she even talked to you. She polled the family to get ammunition. She used the church printer to list the reasons I am unfit. This isn't love. It is a hostile takeover." Marlene let out a sob. It was a loud, theatrical sound. She buried her face in her hands. "You are so cruel," she wailed. "You are twisting everything. I was just trying to help. I see my son suffering. I see him working himself to death for a woman who doesn't appreciate him. And now you are turning him against me. You are turning everyone against me." She looked at Grant, tears streaming down her face. Real tears, fueled by rage and humiliation. "Grant, tell her. Tell her how you feel. Tell her you are unhappy. Don't let her bully me. Grant looked at his mother. Then he looked at me. He looked at the packet of witness statements, the betrayal of his entire family against his wife. He looked at the metadata report, the proof of his mother's calculation. I don't know what to say, Grant whispered. Marlene slammed her hand on the table. The cookie tin rattled. Don't be a coward. Grant, she screamed. Her voice changed. The sweet grandmother mask dissolved, revealing the snarl underneath. Choose, she yelled. Right now. You choose. Are you going to walk out of here with this manipulative, cold-hearted woman who is stalking me? Or are you going to stand by your mother who has sacrificed everything for you? She stood up, pointing a shaking finger at him. It is her or me. Grant, marriage or your mother, you decide, if you leave with her. Don't you dare come to Christmas. Don't you dare come to my house. You are done. The silence that followed was deafening. The air conditioner hummed. A cart rattled in the hallway outside. I looked at Grant. This was it. The moment Diane had predicted. The ultimatum. He looked terrified. He looked at his mother, looming over him like a storm cloud. He looked at me, sitting still, hands folded over the evidence. He opened his mouth. Mom. He couldn't do it. He couldn't say the words. He was frozen in the amber of 40 years of conditioning. I stood up. I didn't wait for him to answer. The silence was the answer. I picked up my folder. I picked up the witness statements. I am going home. Grant, I said quietly, you have a choice to make. You can come home to your wife, or you can go home to your mother. But you cannot have both. Not anymore. I turned to Marlene. I am not turning anyone against you. Marlene, I said, I am just refusing to carry your story. You can tell it to anyone you want. But I won't be a character in it. I walked out of the conference room. I walked down the quiet hallway of the library, past the rows of books, past the receptionist who smiled at me. I walked out to the parking lot and got into my car. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel. I watched the library entrance. 1 minute passed. 2 minutes. I waited to see who would walk out. And as I waited, I realized that for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of the outcome. If he chose her, I was free. If he chose me, we had a chance, but the purgatory was over. The automatic doors slid open. Grant stepped out. He was alone. He looked around the parking lot, spotted my car, and started walking toward me. He walked slowly, like a man carrying a heavy weight. But he was walking toward me. I unlocked the doors. The real fight hadn't ended. It had just begun. But now, at least, I knew who was in the foxhole with me, or so I hoped. Grant sat in the passenger seat of my car, staring out the window at the passing streetlights. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, as if the air had been let out of his tires. His hands were resting in his lap, palms up, in a posture of total surrender. We did not speak for the entire drive home from the library. The silence was not the angry, charged silence of the last few weeks. It was the heavy, exhausted silence of a battlefield after the shooting has stopped. When you are just counting the bodies, when we pulled into our driveway, Grant didn't move to get out. He just sat there, watching the garage door open. I am sorry, he whispered. I turned off the engine. I know, I said, but sorry does not fix the lock. We have to change the keys. I didn't wait for him. I got out of the car, walked into the house, and went straight to the kitchen. I poured a glass of water and drank it standing up. My hands were steady. The trembling I had felt in the library was gone, replaced by a cold, crystalline focus. Grant walked in a few minutes later. He took off his coat and hung it up. He looked at me, waiting for instructions. He was so used to being managed, by his mother, and lately, by his fear of her, that he didn't know how to exist without a directive. Go to bed, Grant, I said. We will talk in the morning. He nodded, looking relieved to be dismissed. He went upstairs, and I stayed down. I didn't sleep that night. I worked. I turned the dining room table into a command center. I laid out every piece of paper I had collected over the last month, the 47 reasons, The witness statements Marlene had produced at the library, the financial records, the metadata report, the screenshots of texts from Cousin Bethany and Aunt Sheila. I wasn't building a divorce case. I was building a deprogramming curriculum. I took a roll of butcher paper I used for wrapping gifts and taped it to the wall. I drew a timeline. January. Marlene sends innocent email about budgeting. February. Marlene asks Tessa about my temper. March. Grant complains about work. Marlene reframes it as my lack of support. April. The help with expenses offer. October. The list. When I laid it out visually, the pattern was undeniable. It wasn't a series of emotional outbursts from a concerned mother. It was a siege. She had encircled us, cut off our supply lines, poisoned the wells with gossip, and then launched the frontal assault at the anniversary dinner. I color-coded the incidents: red for financial interference, blue for emotional manipulation, green for triangulation, pitting family members against me. By 4 a.m, the wall looked like the work of a detective hunting a serial killer, and in a way, I was hunting the killer of my marriage. When the sun came up, I made coffee. Grant came down at 7. He stopped in the doorway of the dining room, staring at the wall. "What is this?" he asked, his voice thick with sleep. "This is your life." "Grant," I said, pouring him a mug. "This is the map. You have been walking in circles for so long you think it is a straight line. I am showing you the loop." He walked closer, reading the entries. He touched a sticky note that read, July 4th. Marlene claims chest pains to prevent Grant from visiting Piper's parents. She was sick. Grant said automatically, "It was angina." I handed him a printout from a weather website and a time-stamped photo from Facebook. "This is a photo of her gardening 2 hours after she called you." I said, "Digging up rose bushes in 90-degree heat. Does that look like angina to you?" Grant stared at the photo. He swallowed hard. "I have more," I said, "but I'm not going to bombard you. I am going to propose a solution." I handed him a sheet of paper. "I have found a mediator." I said, "Her name is Sarah Vance. You know her. I consulted her for legal advice. But she is a certified conflict mediator. She is willing to facilitate a session between the three of us, not to litigate, but to set ground rules." Grant looked at the paper. "A mediator? Mom will never agree to that. She will say we are treating her like a criminal." "She is acting like a criminal," I said. "She is stalking your wife and stealing your financial autonomy if she wants a relationship with us. She sits down with a professional. Those are the terms." Grant rubbed his face. "Okay, I will ask her. But I'm telling you, Piper, it is going to blow up. Call her." I said. He called her from the kitchen. I listened from the living room. I heard him explain, his voice shaking but persistent, that we wanted to move forward but needed a neutral party to help navigate the misunderstandings. I couldn't hear Marlene's words, but I heard the tone. It was the high, sharp frequency of a buzzsaw. Grant hung up after 2 minutes. He looked pale. She said no. He said, "What exactly did she say?" "She said she is not going to be managed by some stranger in a suit. She said she is your mother, not an employee. She said she is praying for you." I nodded. I expected that. Then my phone buzzed. I looked down. It was a notification from Facebook, then another, then a text from my own mother. "Piper, honey, is everything okay?" I just saw Marlene's post. I opened the app. There it was. Marlene hadn't just refused mediation. She had launched a nuclear strike. She had posted a photo of Grant as a child, a sweet, sepia-toned image of him holding her hand. The caption was long and riddled with prayer hand emojis. "Friends and family, I have a heavy heart today. I am asking for urgent prayers for my son, Grant, and his wife, Piper. We are navigating a season of deep spiritual warfare. Piper is struggling with some significant mental and emotional instability right now that is causing great pain to the family. Grant is suffering in silence, as he always does. Please pray for clarity, for healing, and for the demons of division to be cast out. We love her, but we cannot enable the darkness. Family first pray. For Piper crisis. I stared at the screen. Demons of division. Mental instability. She had just told 300 people, including my relatives, our neighbors, and members of our community, that I was crazy and abusing her son. Grant came over and looked at my phone. He read the post. His face went from pale to gray. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Call her." I said, "Tell her to take it down." He dialed. It went straight to voicemail. "She blocked me," he said, staring at the phone. "She posted it and blocked me so I couldn't ask her to delete it." "Of course she did," I said. "She doesn't want a conversation. She wants a court of public opinion." I sat down at the table, feeling a cold rage settle in my chest. She thought this would shame me. She thought I would hide. She thought I would beg Grant to make it stop, but she had forgotten one thing. When you burn down the village, you also burn down your own hiding places. My phone rang. It wasn't a text. It was a call. I looked at the ID cousin Bethany, the one who had written the statement about me being cold. I debated answering, then I remembered the look on Grant's face at the library, the confusion. I needed allies. I swiped answer. "Hello? Bethany? Piper?" Bethany's voice was small, shaky. "I saw the post, Marlene's post. And?" I asked. "And I feel sick," she said. She sounded like she was crying. "Piper, I am so sorry. About the statement, the letter she had in the packet. I didn't say anything. I let the silence stretch. She made me write it." Bethany sobbed. "She called me 3 times a day for a week. She told me you were isolating Grant. She told me you wouldn't let him see us. She said if I didn't write something to wake you up, Grant would end up divorced and alone. She gave me the words, Piper." She literally dictated the part about the eggshells. I closed my eyes. I knew it, but hearing it confirmed was a relief. "Thank you for telling me. Bethany," I said gently, "I am going to comment on the post." Bethany said, her voice finding a shred of strength. "I am going to tell people it is a lie." "No," I said quickly. "Don't do that." "Why?" "She is destroying you. Because if you fight her in the comments, she becomes the victim. She becomes the martyr attacked by the ungrateful youth. Let it stand. Let her look like the woman who airs family laundry on the internet." "But I want to help," Bethany pleaded. "You can help," I said. "Send me the screenshots of the texts where she told you what to write. Send me the dates she called you." "I will," she said. "I will send everything right now." I hung up. 5 minutes later, my phone pinged with a dozen images. Texts from Marlene to Bethany. "Make sure you mention she is cold. Use the word controlling. It needs to sound impartial." I printed them. I taped them to the timeline. I turned to Grant. He was sitting on the sofa, his head in his hands. He was rocking back and forth slightly. "Grant?" I asked. He didn't look up. "I am so tired." "Piper," he whispered. "I am just so tired." I walked over and sat on the coffee table in front of him. I took his hands. They were cold. "I know." I said. "You don't know," he said. Looking up, his eyes were red, filled with a lifetime of exhaustion. It never stops. It has never stopped. Since I was 10 years old. If I didn't get an A, she would get a migraine. If I wanted to go to camp, she would have a panic attack. If I dated a girl she didn't like, she would stop eating. He pulled his hands away and raked them through his hair. "She consumes everything," he said. "She consumes the air in the room. I have spent 30 years managing her happiness so she doesn't crumble. And now she is doing this. She is nuking my life because I told her no once." He looked at me, and I saw the terror of a child who realizes the monster is real. "I don't know how to stop her." "Piper, she is my mother. You can't stop her." I said. "You can only close the door." I went to the command center and pulled down a fresh sheet of paper. "This is the boundary plan." I said. "It is not a negotiation. It is a survival strategy." I wrote 3 headings. 1. The information diet. Marlene gets no information about our finances, our marriage counseling, or our future plans. If she asks, the answer is, "We are handling it." 2. The firewall. No private conversations about our marriage. If she brings me up, you hang up. If she texts about me, you do not reply. 3. Financial transparency. We review all accounts weekly, no hidden transactions, no gifts without discussion. Grant read the list. He nodded at the first two, but at the third one, he hesitated. Piper, I agree about the info diet. He said, but the financial thing? She helps us. Helps us how? I asked. She pays for things, he said, shrugging. Like, she paid for the car insurance last year when things were tight. She paid for that upgrade on our cruise. She sends me money sometimes just to treat us. It is generous. We shouldn't cut that off. I looked at him. He truly believed it was generosity. He didn't see the hook in the worm. Grant, I said, when she paid for the car insurance, what did she say 3 months later when you wanted to skip Sunday dinner? He frowned, thinking. She said after everything she does for us, the least I could do was show up. And when she paid for the cruise upgrade? I asked, what happened when we told her we were spending Christmas with my parents? She cried. He muttered, she said she spent thousands on our happiness and we were abandoning her. I leaned in. She isn't generous. Grant, she invests in leverage. Every dollar she gives you is a purchase of your guilt. She buys the right to dictate your schedule, your loyalty, and your silence. It is not a gift. It is a down payment on your obedience. Grant stared at me. His mouth opened slightly. The realization washed over him, not as a theory, but as a memory of 1,000 small transactions where he had sold his autonomy for a check. She keeps a tally, he whispered. Yes, I said. She keeps a ledger, and you are deep in debt. He looked at the timeline on the wall. He looked at the screenshots from Bethany. He looked at the 47 reasons lying on the table. He looked frightened, not of me, of the trap he had been living in. What do we do? He asked. We settle the debt, I said, and we close the account. I went to my laptop. I drafted an email, not to Marlene, to a man named Thomas Miller. Thomas was a retired magistrate who now worked as a private arbitrator. He was expensive, impartial, and intimidatingly formal. I had found him through Sarah Vance. I hired him for 2 hours on Saturday evening. Then I texted Marlene. Marlene, we saw your post. We understand you are hurting. We want to clear the air. Please come over Saturday at 7, just you. We will have coffee and dessert. We want to put this behind us. I showed the text to Grant. She will think she won, he said. She will think the post broke us. Exactly. I said, that is why she will come. Saturday evening arrived with a sky the color of a bruise. The air was heavy with impending rain. I had prepared the house. The timeline was taken down from the wall. The command center was dismantled. The dining room table was set with a lace tablecloth, my good china, and a pot of fresh coffee. Thomas Miller arrived at 6:30. He was a tall man with silver hair and a suit that cost more than my car. He sat in the corner of the dining room, his briefcase on his lap. He looked like a statue of judgment. I explained his role. He wasn't to speak unless spoken to. He was simply to witness, to be the eyes that Marlene couldn't gaslight. Grant was pacing the kitchen. He was sweating. She is going to flip out when she sees him. He said, let her. I said, I am done managing her reactions. At 7 o'clock. The doorbell rang. Grant went to answer it. I stood by the dining table, my hands clasped in front of me. I heard Marlene's voice before I saw her. Oh, my baby, she cried. I knew you would come to your senses. She walked into the dining room. She was wearing a floral dress and carrying a plastic container. I brought my lemon drizzle cake, she announced, beaming. It is Grant's favorite. I thought we needed something sweet to wash away all this sourness. She looked at me. Her smile was triumphant. It was the smile of a general accepting a surrender. Hello, Piper, she said. I hope you are feeling better. I have had the whole prayer circle lifting you up. I didn't smile back. Hello, Marlene. Please, sit down. She bustled to the table, setting down the cake. Then she noticed Mr. Miller in the corner. Who is that? she asked, her smile faltering. This is Mr. Thomas Miller, I said. He is a retired magistrate and a certified witness. He is here to observe our conversation and ensure an accurate record is kept. Marlene froze. Her hands hovered over the cake container. A witness? She spat. In my son's home? Grant, tell him to leave. This is a family matter. Grant stepped into the room. He looked at his mother. He looked at the cake, the symbol of the bribe, the sweet treat meant to make him forget the poison. He stays. Mom, Grant said. His voice wavered. But he didn't back down. We need a record. Because you lie. Marlene gasped. She clutched her pearls, literally clutched them, and staggered back a step. I lie? I lie? I have done nothing but love you. I have sacrificed my life for you. And this is how you repay me? Accusing me in front of a stranger? She turned to me, her eyes narrowing into slits. You did this, she hissed. You poisoned him. You are the one who lies. You are the one who is unstable. Sit down. Marlene, I said. I will not. I am leaving. You can leave, I said calmly. But if you walk out that door, Grant and I are going no contact. Permanently, no Christmas, no birthdays, no grandchildren. The word grandchildren stopped her. It was the ultimate leverage, the future supply. She stood there, breathing hard. She weighed her options. She realized that if she left, she lost access. If she stayed, she might still be able to manipulate the situation. She was confident in her ability to spin a story. She sat down. She smoothed her dress. Fine, she said, her voice dripping with ice. Say your piece, but I will not be bullied. I sat opposite her. Grant sat at the head of the table. Between us, I poured 3 cups of coffee. I didn't offer her cake. I reached under the table and pulled out the original 47 Reasons envelope. I placed it in the center of the table. We have read your list. Marlene, I said, we have analyzed it. We have fact-checked it. I placed the metadata report on top of it. We know you wrote it at the church. We know you consulted a paralegal. We know you coordinated with Aunt Sheila and Cousin Bethany to fabricate witness statements. Marlene waved a hand dismissively. That is old news. I was upset. I was protecting Grant. I pulled out a second envelope. This one was thick, white, and sealed with wax. I had bought a seal just for this occasion. It felt important to have a ritual. And now, I said, sliding the new envelope toward her, before we talk about the future, I need you to read something too. What is this? She asked, eyeing it like it was a bomb. It is a document I prepared. I said, it is not 47 reasons. It is only 12. She sneered. 12 reasons you hate me? No. I said, 12 instances of documented financial and emotional extortion committed by Marlene Bailey against her son and daughter-in-law, spanning the last 5 years. I opened my notebook. Mr. Miller, I said to the witness, please note that the document has been presented at 7:15 p.m. Marlene looked at Mr. Miller. She looked at Grant. She looked at the envelope. Open it, Grant said softly. She ripped the envelope open. She pulled out the papers. It wasn't a rant. It was a spreadsheet. It was a log. It was the timeline I had built on the wall, condensed into 12 undeniable points of contact where money was exchanged for control, and love was exchanged for obedience. She started to read. Her face turned from red to white. This is nonsense, she sputtered. The car insurance. That was a gift. Item number 4. I read aloud. January 2024. Marlene Bailey pays $600 for car insurance. February 2024. Marlene Bailey texts Grant. I paid your bills, so you have to come to the gala. Grant declines. Marlene Bailey threatens to call Grant's boss and express concern about his financial stability. I looked at her. That is not a gift. Marlene, that is blackmail. She slammed the paper down. I never threatened his boss. I pulled out a screenshot. Here's the text. I said, maybe I should call Mr. Henderson and see if he knows his VP can't even pay his own Geico bill. Mr. Miller scribbled in his notepad. The sound of his pen on paper was the only noise in the room. Marlene looked trapped. She looked at the cake she had brought, sitting there untouched. The sweetness was gone. The narrative was gone. There was only the data. Grant looked at his mother. He wasn't looking at her with fear anymore. He was looking at her with a profound, heartbreaking pity. "Why, Mom?" he asked. "Why do you do it?" "Because you need me," she screamed, abandoning all pretense of calm. "You are weak. Grant, you have always been weak. You need someone to steer the ship or you will crash. She is going to ruin you. She is going to leave you broke and alone. I am the only one who stays." I stood up. "I am not going anywhere." "Marlene," I said. "But you are—" I pointed to the document. "You have a choice. You can sign an agreement acknowledging these behaviors and agreeing to the boundaries we have set. No financial gifts, no private calls about our marriage, and a mandatory apology to the family members you lied to." "And if I don't?" she challenged, her chin high. I picked up the file containing the church printer logs and the witness tampering texts. "Then I send this to Father Michael," I said, "and I send it to every person you emailed on the prayer chain. I will reply to your crisis post with the receipts of your cruelty. I will not let you destroy my reputation. I will expose yours." Marlene stared at me. She saw the absolute resolve in my eyes. She saw that the prey had become the predator. She looked at Grant. "Help me," she whispered. Grant looked at the woman who had birthed him, the woman who had loved him with a love that suffocated. Read the document. "Mom," he said, "and decide who you want to be." Marlene looked down at the papers. Her hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled against the table. The room was silent. The only sound was the ticking of the clock and the scratching of Mr. Miller's pen. She had to choose. Control or connection, pride or presence, and for the first time in her life, Marlene Bailey did not have the last word. The paper did. The dining room felt like a courtroom where the air conditioning had been turned down too low. The silence was brittle, liable to snap at any moment. Mr. Miller sat in the corner, his pen hovering over his notepad, a silent sentinel of accountability. Grant sat at the head of the table, looking between the two women who defined his existence, his face pale and slick with sweat. Marlene sat opposite me, staring at the wax-sealed envelope I had just placed in front of her as if it contained anthrax. "Open it, Marlene," I said. My voice was low, devoid of the tremor that used to be there whenever I spoke to her. She looked at the envelope, then at me. Her lip curled. "I will not," she said, pushing it back across the tablecloth with one manicured finger. "I refuse to participate in this charade. You think you can intimidate me with your little lists? You are a child. Piper, you have no idea what it takes to hold a family together." I didn't push the envelope back. I left it there. A white flag on the battlefield that was actually a landmine. "It is not a list of insults. Marlene," I said, "it is a mirror, and if you won't look at it yourself, I will hold it up for you." I opened my own copy of the document. I smoothed the pages flat. Section 1. I read, "The myth of the fragile mother." Marlene scoffed. A sharp, incredulous sound. "Oh, please." Date, August 14th. I read, "You called Grant at 2 p.m, claiming you were having heart palpitations and needed him to come over immediately. You implied it was stress-induced because we had booked a vacation to Mexico. Grant left work, missing a client meeting, and drove to your house. I looked up. When he arrived, you were not having palpitations. You were repotting hydrangeas in the backyard. You told him the fresh air had cured you, but you kept him there for 3 hours moving heavy pots." I turned the page. Date, September 2nd. You texted me asking if Grant seemed depressed. You said, quote, "I worry he's losing his spark." When I asked why, you said, "He just seems so burdened by the mortgage." Later that same day, you texted Grant saying, "Piper seems so demanding lately. Are you sure you can afford her lifestyle?" I looked at Grant. She played both sides of the fence. "Grant, she told me you were sad. She told you I was greedy. She created a problem so she could be the only one to solve it. That is a lie, Marlene shouted, slamming her hand on the table. I never said you were greedy. I said you were ambitious. I pulled a printed screenshot from the appendix of my document. Text message from Marlene Bailey to Aunt Sheila. Dated September 3rd. I read, Piper is bleeding him dry. She is like a tick. The word tick hung in the air. Ugly and parasitic. Marlene went red. Her mouth opened and closed. But no sound came out. She looked at Mr. Miller, who was writing furiously. Stop writing, she commanded him. This is private. Mr. Miller didn't look up. He turned a page. I continued. Section 2. The medical fabrication. I looked at her directly. You told Cousin Bethany that I was on medication for bipolar disorder. I said, you told her that was why I was so cold. You said you had seen the pill bottles in my bathroom. Marlene looked away, feigning interest in the pattern of the tablecloth. I was mistaken. I saw bottles. I was concerned. They were vitamins. Marlene, I said, and you know they were vitamins, but you needed a diagnosis to explain why I didn't cry when you insulted me. You needed me to be sick, so you could be the saint who tolerates me. I flipped to the back of the document, but the most interesting part isn't the lies. I said, it is the strategy. I reached into my bag and pulled out the final piece of evidence. This was the one I had saved for the end. The kill shot. When you gave me the 47 reasons, you claimed it was a mother's heart on paper. You claimed it was an emotional outpouring of concern. I slid a single sheet of paper across the table. This is an email draft, I said. It was recovered from the server log of the family computer you gave us last year, the one you thought was wiped. But Grant never reformatted. Marlene went still, absolutely still. It is dated October 1st. I said, 2 weeks before the anniversary dinner. It is addressed to Brenda Colvin. Your friend, the paralegal. I began to read the email aloud. Hi, Brenda. I need your eyes on this list. I want to make sure the language is strong enough to be used in a custody hearing if it comes to that. Specifically, look at Reason 18 regarding the finances. Can we phrase it to sound like dissipation of assets instead of just spending? And regarding her temper, what is the legal threshold for emotional instability? I want Grant to have a roadmap when he finally wakes up. I put the paper down. You weren't venting. Marlene, you were drafting a legal pleading. You were coaching a witness. You were preparing to destroy my life before you even served the appetizers. Marlene stared at the paper. Her composure, which had been a fortress of granite for 40 years, cracked. It didn't crumble. It shattered. She lunged across the table, her hand clawed for the paper, her nails scratching against the wood. Give me that, she shrieked. You have no right. That is mine. I didn't flinch. I placed my hand flat over the paper, pinning it down. Mr. Miller stood up, ready to intervene, but I shook my head. Sit down, Marlene, I said. My voice was ice. She froze. Her chest was heaving. She looked at Grant, her eyes wide and terrified. Grant, take it from her, she screamed. She hacked my computer. She is a criminal. Grant didn't move. He was staring at the email draft. He was reading the words upside down. Custody hearing. Roadmap. You were planning a divorce, he whispered. His voice was broken. You were planning a custody battle. For children that don't even exist yet. I was protecting you. Marlene sobbed, collapsing back into her chair. She buried her face in her hands. You don't understand. She is going to take you away. She is going to move you to the city, and I will never see you. I had to make sure you were safe. I had to make sure you had a case. Grant looked at me. His face was a mask of horror. He had spent his life believing his mother was difficult, yes, and overbearing, surely, but he had believed she acted out of love, a twisted, suffocating love, but love nonetheless. Now, he saw the truth. It wasn't love. It was ownership. She had treated his marriage like a defective asset that needed to be liquidated. I thought... Grant stammered. I thought you just didn't like her. I didn't know you were trying to legally dismantle her. Marlene looked up, tears streaming down her face. Her makeup was running. black streaks cutting through the perfect foundation. "I did it for you," she wailed. "Everything is for you. Why can't you see that? I am the only one who really knows you." I stood up. I walked around the table until I was standing next to Grant. I put a hand on his shoulder. He flinched, then leaned into my touch. "I am not here to punish you. Marlene," I said, "I don't want your money. I don't want your apology, because I know it wouldn't be real." I picked up the 47 Reasons packet, the original one she had given me, and held it up. "I am here to end this." I looked at Grant. "You have seen the evidence," I said. "You have seen the timeline. You have seen the legal drafts. There is no more middle ground. There is no more keeping the peace." Grant looked up at me. His eyes were wet. "I'm so sorry." "Piper," he said, "don't apologize to me." I said, "Act." I turned to Marlene. "Here are the terms." I said. I didn't hand her a paper. I spoke them into the air, letting Mr. Miller record every syllable. 1. You will acknowledge, in writing, that the accusations in the 47 Reasons are false. 2. You will cease all communication with my extended family regarding my mental health or my marriage. 3. You will never, ever speak to Grant about our finances again. If you offer him a gift, it will be returned. If you pay a bill, we will refund it. And 4, I said, leaning in, you will respect the fact that Grant is a grown man. If you try to triangulate us again, if you call him to whisper about me, or call me to complain about him, we will take a 6-month break from seeing you. No calls, no visits, no holidays. Marlene stared at me. Her weeping had stopped, replaced by a cold, calculating look. She wiped her eyes with a napkin. She looked at the cake on the table. She looked at the witness in the corner. She realized the emotional appeal had failed. The tantrum had failed. So she played her last card, the only card she had left, the checkbook. She sat up straighter. She smoothed her hair. She took a deep breath and composed her face into a mask of benevolent pity. You are very angry, Piper, she said softly. And I understand. I really do. Maybe I went too far. A mother's love can be intense. She turned to Grant, ignoring me completely. Grant, darling, listen to me. I can see this house is too small for all this tension. I know you have been looking at that colonial on Elm Street, the one with the big yard. Grant blinked, confused by the pivot. The colonial? I made some calls, Marlene said, her voice silky. I can buy it for you. Cash. Put it in your name. A fresh start. No mortgage. You can start your consulting firm without worrying about the bills. She reached across the table and took Grant's hand. And I can set up a trust for the grandchildren. $1 million. Grant, vesting when they turn 18. Their college paid for. Their future secured. I watched her work. It was masterful. She was offering him the dream, the house, the career, the security for his unborn children. But, she added, her eyes flicking to me for a nanosecond, there are conditions. Of course, for the trust to be valid. What conditions? Grant asked. His voice was barely a whisper. Just stability. Marlene said, we would need to ensure the home environment is stable. I would like to visit once a week, Sundays, just to help out. And perhaps Piper could agree to, well, maybe see someone, just to talk about her anger? A Christian counselor I know? She smiled. It was the smile of a shark offering a life raft. And I think it would be best if we put the past behind us. Burn these silly lists. Forget this mediation. Just be a family again. A rich, happy, secure family. She squeezed his hand. Grant, think about the firm. Think about the freedom. I can give you everything you want. All you have to do is let me in. The room was silent. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Grant looked at his mother. He looked at the promise of a mortgage-free life. He looked at the easy way out. All he had to do was nod. All he had to do was let her win. Just a little bit. Let her have her Sundays. Let her have her Christian counselor. Let her buy his silence with $1 million trust. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. I knew how tired he was. I knew how much he wanted to start his firm. I didn't speak. I couldn't save him from this choice. Grant looked at me. He looked at the woman who had documented his mother's abuse on a wall for 3 nights straight. He looked at the woman who had stood in the library parking lot waiting for him. Then he looked back at his mother. He pulled his hand away from hers. It was a small movement, but it felt like an earthquake. "You are trying to buy me," he said. "I am trying to help you," Marlene insisted. "No," Grant said. His voice gained strength. "You are trying to buy a permit. You want to buy a permit to abuse my wife. You want to pay off the mortgage so you can own the keys to the front door." He stood up. "I don't want the house. Mom, I don't want the trust. And I definitely don't want your fresh start." Marlene gaped at him. "Grant, be reasonable. It is $1 million. I don't care if it is 10 million. Grant said. "The cost is too high. The cost is Piper." He reached down and picked up the 47 reasons. "You wrote that I needed a partner who elevates me," he said, quoting the list. "You wrote that Piper was a weight." He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw the man I had fallen in love with. The man who had been hidden under layers of guilt and obligation. "She is the only one who has ever told me the truth," Grant said. "You have been lying to me my whole life. You told me your control was love. You told me your manipulation was anxiety. Piper is the only one who respected me enough to show me the facts." He turned back to Marlene. "We are done. Mom." Marlene stood up, her chair scraping violently against the floor. "You are making a mistake," she screamed. "She is brainwashing you. You will be back. You will come crawling back when she leaves you." Grant shook his head. "No, I won't. Please leave my house," Grant said. Marlene looked at him. She looked at me. She looked at Mr. Miller, who was calmly noting the time of departure. She grabbed her purse. She grabbed the plastic container with the lemon cake. She didn't look at me again. She couldn't. I was the mirror, and she couldn't stand the reflection. She walked out of the dining room. We heard the front door open, then slam shut, then the sound of her car engine roaring to life and peeling out of the driveway. The silence rushed back into the room. Mr. Miller cleared his throat. He stood up and closed his notebook. "I believe my services are concluded," he said. "I will have the transcript typed and notarized by Monday morning." "Thank you." "Mr. Miller," I said. He nodded to us and let himself out. Grant and I were alone. The dining room table was covered in paper. The wreckage of a war, the 47 reasons, the witness statements, the email drafts, the timeline. Grant sank into his chair. He put his head in his hands. He didn't cry. He just breathed. Long, shuddering breaths, like a man who had just surfaced from deep water. I didn't go to him, not yet. I stayed on my side of the table. He looked up at me. I almost took it. He said, his voice was raw. For a second, "I almost took the house. I know." I said, "I am weak. Piper, I am so used to giving in. I don't know if I can be the husband you need. I don't know if I can fix this." He looked at the papers scattered between us. "How do we come back from this?" he asked. "She is my mother, and she hates you, and I let her do it." I picked up the original envelope, the one that started it all. I walked around the table and placed it in front of him. I sat down next to him. I didn't hug him. I didn't tell him it was going to be okay. I didn't offer him a platitude. "We don't come back from it. Grant," I said, "we don't go back to who we were. That marriage is dead. Marlene killed it at the anniversary dinner." Grant looked at me, panic rising in his eyes. "So, are you leaving?" "No." I said, "I am staying. But we are starting a new marriage, one based on reality." I tapped the envelope. "Read it again," I said. He looked at it. "I don't want to. It is poison." "Read it," I commanded softly. "Read all 47 reasons. Read every insult. Read every lie. Read every accusation she made against the woman you vowed to protect." He slowly pulled the stapled document out of the envelope. His hands were shaking. "Why?" he asked. "Because you need to remember," I said. Every time she calls, every time she sends a gift, every time she cries and tells you she is lonely, you need to remember that this is what she thinks of us. This is her truth. I stood up and walked to the doorway of the kitchen. I looked back at him. He was sitting in the dim light of the dining room, the document open in his hands, reading the words that had been designed to break me. Read it slowly. Grant, I said, and when you are done, tell me who you want to be. I walked upstairs and left him there. I sat on the edge of our bed and listened. For a long time, there was silence. Then, I heard the sound of paper tearing. Rip, then again. Rip, and again. He wasn't just reading it. He was shredding it. I lay back on the pillows and closed my eyes. The war wasn't over. Marlene would be back. There would be flying monkeys, guilt trips, and probably a lawsuit. But the siege was broken. I had my answer. And for the first time in 47 days, I fell asleep without checking the locks. Thank you so much for listening to My Mother-in-Law Gave Me 47 Reasons My Son Should Divorce You. Froze when I read it. This story was a journey into the dark corners of family manipulation and the strength it takes to stand in the truth. I hope Piper's courage inspired you as much as it did me. I would love to hear from you. Please comment below and tell me where you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed this battle for truth, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. We have many more tales of justice, drama, and sweet retribution coming your way. Share your thoughts in the comments in English. Do you think Grant will stay strong, or will Marlene find a way back in? What would you have done in Piper's shoes? Until next time, stay strong and trust your instincts.